Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Legends of Sport podcast. I'm your host, Andy Bernstein. Today's guest is a man who was part of two NBA championship teams with Shaq and Kobe, the great Mark Madsen. Mark is a member of the Stanford Athletics Hall of Fame and is currently the head men's basketball coach at Utah Valley University. Mark and I had a wonderful conversation about his history as a Laker, playing an integral part of those two championship teams, his relationship with Shaq, including a hilarious story about his car, playing and learning under the great Phil Jackson, and of course, his memories of the Mamba himself, Kobe Bryant. We recorded this episode right before Mark and his wife welcomed their third child, Alexandria, into the family. So huge congratulations to Mark and Hannah from all of us here at the Legends of the Sport podcast. Enjoy this episode with the always engaging Mark Madsen. And as always, I'll see you on the backside. First of all, thank you so much for making the time. I know you're grinding right now and have family responsibilities, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us on the Legends of Sport podcast. Let's talk a little bit about the pandemic. So how that affected you as a coach. We all know how it affected all of us as, fathers and husbands and all our families, but how did it affect you and your program?
Well, it was tough, Andy, because we actually went into quarantine 7 or 8 separate times in the non-conference schedule. So we ended up winning our conference. We ended up winning our regular season conference, tied it with Grand Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
I think we played a bunch of games in the non-conference shorthanded due to COVID. But really, that affected a lot of people, a lot of teams. It affected us heavily, the non-conference. But I give our players a lot of credit. They were resilient. They really did everything possible to find a way to get extra reps in. We had some practices, Andy, where we were almost in quarantine during the practice, staying 8 to 10 feet away, sanitizing the basketballs every 20 minutes. When we did water breaks, guys would never congregate. And so there were so many different things we had to do and put into place in order to be able to practice.
Yeah. Was there a time where you were completely shut down, where you had to do things virtually, or?
Yeah. And in fact, that we had probably 6 of those where it was a complete shutdown.
Yeah.
And, hard times, and I feel bad for the players in our program during those times. Now we came together and had a great season, very fortunate in that sense, but the group that's really suffering are the juniors and seniors in high school because they didn't get a senior year.
Yeah.
A lot of them didn't get to play. And then on top of it, in college basketball, 90% of college head coaches are enamored by the transfer portal, meaning free agency. And so people are overlooking high school juniors and seniors because everybody wants, transfers because they're seasoned veterans for the college game.
Yeah, it's so hard, man. I mean, I have a nephew who just graduated high school. He spent his whole senior year, virtual learning. I have a 13-year-old who's spent her whole 7th grade in her room, but we're resilient, man. We made it through. We all made it through. Thank God. Healthy.
Right.
What from your playing, I mean, it's kind of a broad question, but from your playing career, being around Phil Jackson, especially making adjustments on the fly, I mean, what did you learn from that whole experience, kind of guiding your team in your program through this difficult time? There's some lessons you learned, something you can draw from maybe that happened while you were a player or an assistant coach, and working with Phil, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think about Phil a lot. I stay in touch with Phil. I texted him several months ago, and I just said, "Hey, Phil, we're running your play." It's funny. Almost all of us that played for Phil, he has a play, WTF, and all of us run it. From Bryant Shaw to Luke Walton to, anyone.
I don't want to guess what that WTF stands for.
That's the name of the play.
Yeah.
And we run the play.
Yeah.
And the play, it's funny, in my first year here, it was one of our highest points per possession plays that we had. Now it's a side out of bounds play,
Yeah.
And so in college, you don't have as many side out of bounds plays.
Mhm.
Phil used it late game.
Yeah.
It's funny because I was watching a broadcast on TV, probably in the mid 2000s. I was still playing in the NBA, and Doug Collins was doing the commentary on a Phil Jackson Lakers game. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was a late game scenario. And Doug Collins said, well, Phil's going to run right here, a little, a rip screen on the strong side and a flare screen on the weak side.
Uh-huh.
And I laughed because Phil ran that play 90% of the time in a late game scenario.
Wow.
Do you remember the play, Andy? Do you remember the play?
You know, this is my 40th year mark. I don't know a back screen from a whatever. I don't know crap. I look at the board that the coaches put up, and I got no idea. I kind of a little bit figured out a little bit the triangle. Kind of got that.
Yeah.
But yeah. Do you run the triangle at all up there with the Wolverines?
Yeah, so we looked at portions of it my first year.
Yeah.
And the guys loved it. The players loved it because there's structure within freedom within structure.
Mm-hmm.
And so our players loved it for that reason. Now, the only bad thing about the triangle in today's game is that some of the actions are being generated for long 2-point shots.
Mm-hmm.
And the game has really moved to the 3-point line. But, I talked to Phil about that, and he made the point. It's a great point. You can tweak the triangle to generate more threes. We actually shot a ton of threes in the early 2000s. Phil was ahead of his time in so many ways, including the fact that we got a lot of open threes. The bottom line is we look at small portions of the triangle. Mm-hmm. What made the triangle great, I think, at the Lakers with Phil and in Chicago is that there was a core group of guys that ran it over a period of years. Okay. Mm-hmm. In college basketball, we don't have that luxury now because it's essentially free agency every single spring.
Yeah.
And so, and that's with the new transfer rule, which I'm happy the NCAA passed it, but the effect is it's almost like running a G League team in the sense is that there's a lot of player turnover on every team in the country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hey, Mark, in your conference, I mean, do most players stay 4 years, or they're not one and dones like in the other schools, the bigger schools we think about in Division I?
We don't have so many one or dones, but what we have is if a player, for example, is player of the year or all conference, a lot of times those players will look to go up a conference. Mm-hmm. We're in the WAC. Okay, they're player of the year. Okay, now they want to go to the Pac-12 or the Big 10 or the Big 12.
Right.
And so some of the best players go. Now, if a player has already transferred once, it's very difficult for them to transfer again. Mm-hmm. And so some college coaches that I talk to, their literal strategy is only recruit transfers because once they're in your program, they can't leave.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I had a very interesting conversation with Coach K about this, and rightly so. He's super frustrated with the one and done stuff. He respected players' need to go and earn a living and be ready for the NBA, but being too young, or the fact of a coach having to recruit a guy to play 1 year as opposed to 4 years was kind of grinding on him. And I'm wondering, I would love to talk to him about if any of that influenced his decision to retire. Mm-hmm. Because, as you're recruiting a guy, you're hoping that he's going to stay at least, 3 years, 4 years, get his degree. And I know how important it is to you as an educator too, as you are, for the guys to get their degrees. So a lot of that gets lost in the shuffle now with the one and done business.
Yeah. It does. The one and done is it's great for the players. It's hard on the coaches. Mm-hmm. You think about the tens of thousands of dollars that go into recruiting a top 10 player in the country. And when I was at Stanford as an assistant, we could recruit to that top 10 to top 50 caliber player as long as they had the academics. But it's cross-country flights. Yeah. It's a lot of flights. It's a lot of hotel rooms. It's a lot of time on the road. And so there could be some players, if you're recruiting them, from the summer of their sophomore year, there's a scenario where $100,000 could be invested into a player, depending on how many times you go out and see that particular player. Yeah. If the player is a priority, you might see that player. I can't remember what the rule is. I have it written down somewhere, maybe 7 times a year. But starting kind of that summer of their rising junior, you get 7 there, you get 7 junior year, 7 senior year,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 20
Yeah.
opportunities, and then a couple thousand a pop. I mean, it's a huge investment. And then most of the players, they go elsewhere because they can only choose one school.
Right. Yeah. Well, do you enjoy that part of the job, the recruiting part? I mean, I know the schlepping around and leaving your family and having to, go to the far reaches of wherever to talk to families and players and watch them, because I'm sure there's some scouting involved too, right? You have to watch them play.
Yeah,
How much of that of the job is a little, of a grind?
I actually love it.
Yeah.
I actually love recruiting. I mean, it is hard to leave your family. I've got 2 young sons, 3.5 and just over 1 years old.
Mhm.
And so there is an element where you miss your family. You're away from your family. Luckily, we have a staff here at Utah Valley that, we're a team. We're a
Mhm.
team.
Yeah.
I went out last weekend. I'm going out this weekend, but then I'm staying at home in July because Hannah's due date is late July.
Yeah.
And they'll go out, and then we hit September, I'll go out. Some head coaches don't go out very much. I like going out because it gives me a chance to meet the players, see them in their environment.
Yeah.
Look, my wife and I were chasing young kids, so sometimes getting on that plane, it allows me to just get a lot of work done too.
Yeah. Dude, I remember my kids were spaced out a little bit like yours, in terms of being really close in age, and I'd go on the road just to get some sleep. I got I remember really when you were with the Lakers, I mean, my kids were 5 and 4. Now they're 25 and 26, but that's a whole other story. So Mark, you ended up at Stanford, like you said. Got a great education, played 4 years at Stanford, and then unlike many players, but similar to some players, you went and did your mission, your 2-year mission in Spain, correct?
Yeah.
So you came into the league, you were what, 23, 4?
23 or 24.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So what did that experience do to help you, being more mature, 4 years of college,
Yeah.
life experience, doing what you did in Spain for your mission? How did that help you?
Well, it helped me a lot. Like you said, I served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Mhm.
I was there in Spain for 2 years. And so both those activities are very character building,
Mhm.
because the community service, I mean, can you ever do enough service for anyone?
Mm.
You get outside of yourself, you think about others, you think less about self. And then in terms of sharing of the faith, that I really enjoyed too, because I was able to share the faith, but I was also able to gain a tremendous amount of respect for the beliefs of others, and that's a core tenet in my faith.
Mhm.
And so really look, you knock on a door, you get the door slammed in your face at times. That's character building. You knock on the door, people say, "Hey, I'm not interested in the faith, but I would love to talk about basketball."
Mhm. Mhm.
And you get some that have questions about the faith, and so you really experience a broad spectrum of responses, and
Mhm.
it was a tremendous life experience, tremendous. While at the same time, I was learning Spanish
Yeah.
because in Spain, in the LDS faith, you go to a missionary training school where they really teach you the language in full immersion for
Mhm.
2 months.
Yeah.
I got to Spain and I'm thinking I'm fluent. Shoot, I could barely understand. I would say phrases in Spanish to Spaniards, and they would look at me and say, "I don't speak English." They,
Yeah.
they would tell that to me, and in my mind, I'm thinking, "No, I'm speaking to you in Spanish." But that's how bad my Spanish was when I first got there.
Yeah.
Over time, you learn, you grow, and
Yeah.
there's a process.
Uh-huh.
So getting to the NBA, it's a process. It's a
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
The
Mhm.
first game I went into, uh, I got a few passes and had a dunk or two, but
Mhm.
then you hit some lows where you missed some layups. I had struggles from the free throw line at times, and you have to just stay the course. Phil Jackson would talk about that all the time. You
Mhm.
have to stay the course. You have to be persistent. You have to come with great energy every single day, and you chip away,
Mhm.
and eventually you have a breakthrough.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you talk about Phil and the lessons of Phil. I mean, that could be a whole other podcast. But
Yeah.
you played with some amazing teammates. Two of them, obviously Kobe and Shaq. But you also played with some other teammates that were, really amazing as well. And you guys won two championships back to back, 2000, 2001. You were an integral part of that. Um, I wasn't familiar with the fact that that your nickname Mad Dog came from college. I actually thought Shaq gave you that nickname, or maybe he takes credit for it. I don't know.
It's funny. It definitely rose to prominence in college,
Yeah,
but from the fifth grade, my friends were calling me that. Yeah,
that's scary. I didn't
yeah.
know that. So,
Yeah.
Mark, but being a role player on that squad, right? Adjusting to that. I mean, I think you seamlessly moved into that role. Um, I was at so many of those practices where you would just go up against Shaq, you go against Kobe. You didn't back down at all. You seem to really love the challenge of that, right? The energy that you brought to the team. I think people, nowadays don't really realize how important you were to that squad. And Phil talks about the guys who really got the triangle during his tenure. I mean, you, Luke Walton. He said John Sally didn't quite get didn't quite get it. There are guys along the way that didn't get it. Kobe relished it. Kobe wanted to be immersed in it. Took Shaq a few minutes to kind of get it right. Um, do you remember anything specific about frustration with the triangle, or any on your part, or just did you move seamlessly into it?
The triangle was such a mythical thing because when I was at Stanford, I read one of Phil's books and he talked all about the triangle and
Right, right.
I wanted to learn it so badly, and then I get drafted to the Lakers, and Phil talks about it too. He says, "Hey, the enigma of the triangle is that it is extremely complicated, but at the same time, and you know this, Andy, because you saw the rhythm of it every game and in practices, and you recognize it's very simplistic also.
Mm-hmm.
And what I liked about Phil was that if you could build trust with Phil, but then also with your teammates, and that was big with Phil. Phil wasn't like a guy that said, I'm going to say it as the head coach and you have to do it. Phil was more like, find a way to fit in with your teammates and make something positive happen. So the joy of the triangle for me was, and Andy, I recognize that, I was in the NBA based on hard work and effort. As much as I worked to try to have the same level of talent or a similar talent as, you're never going to be like a Kobe or a Shaq, but you're working towards that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that. I didn't have that, but I had work ethic and I had energy and I had effort.
Absolutely.
I think those things translated to the triangle because you could then read things yourself and create for others.
Yeah, yeah. So, Mark, I read some. We did a lot of research. I mean, I know you, of course, but I didn't know a lot of deep things about you. And you talked a lot about and things we read about balance, work-life balance, sports and life balance, all kinds of balance. And you also referred to Kobe, and you talked about how you saw him mature. Once he started having kids. You talked very eloquently about when Natalia came along and how proud he was. It was during the playoffs against Sacramento, and he just wanted to talk about his newborn baby. um, as a coach now with young men, how do you get that across about balance? I mean, we all know about the Mamba mentality, obsession being one of the key ingredients, one of the pillars. But how do you dial that back with these young guys and show them, hey, there's more to life than just what's going on the court?
It's a challenge. It's hard because we only recruit players at Utah Valley that want to make the NBA, that want to be pros. Not everyone on our team will make the NBA. I mean, one of our players just had an NBA workout with the Knicks. It's Fardaz Amack. But it's hard because there's such an aspiration amongst young players to be the best version of themselves on the court and off that they can be. And so we try to work very hard in the gym, but we also try to get out and do other things also. We were talking about taking our team down to Zion's National Park.
Wow.
Zion Park is outside of St. George. There's amazing rock formations. There's slot canyons.
Yeah.
And some of the kids from out of state, have never been in a slot canyon before,
Right.
including me. I'd never been in a slot canyon until I was in my mid-20s. And so I want to take the kids and our players,
Yeah.
and we work hard all week, and then I want to take them on the weekend and go up a slot canyon in Zion's National Park.
Yeah.
Take some pictures, create some memories, have a good meal at the great taco place right outside of the park, because basketball is life, but life is bigger than basketball.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, I'm thinking about Phil and traveling on with the team. I didn't go on every road trip, but I went on a lot of them, and how he would try to incorporate what was going on in whatever part of the world or the country we were in. Of course, the famous book exchanges that he would do. Does any book stand out that Phil gave you along the way?
I mean, two of them definitely stand out. And you always wonder, why did Phil give me this book? But he would tell you why. But that was the holistic approach of Phil Jackson.
Yeah.
He recognized life was bigger than basketball.
Mm-hmm.
He was a person of deep spirituality in terms of the Buddhist influence, the Zen influence, and Phil doesn't talk about it, but Phil kind of, in a way, preached karma. He really kind of did. Kind of the idea of what goes around comes around, and so Phil was big on life lessons. One of the books he gave me was about kind of the early settlement of the West, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and he wrote me the note in the book, and he said, "Hey, this is a book for you. It's about your heritage," and it was about some pioneers of a particular religious faith moving westward. And the trials that they endured, and that was kind of the message to me, and I felt good because Phil knew me. He knew my family situation. He knew where I came from. He knew my religious faith. Phil took the time to get to know his players.
Yeah. How much of that have you brought into your coaching style? Do you give out books to your guys?
I actually haven't given out books yet, and probably because our players, they're doing so much studying in school that it's hard to find the time for them to read it. But I have tried to incorporate a lot of Phil's teachings. There was one time when it was a road trip to Sacramento. It was a regular season road trip. I was going to drive over back to Danville and host a little get together, actually at my parents' house with some college friends. So I had the party all set up. The get together, I was young 20s, and we landed before we took off. Phil said, "By the way, block out your evening tonight, because we are going to go to a destination together as a team." I'm like, dang, I got to cancel my get together. So I text everyone, "Hey, sorry, something came up," and so we get to the hotel in Sacramento after we land there, and we get out of the hotel, we get out of the bus, and Phil says, "Be on the bus at 7 p.m. and I will take you to our destination." And it was this thing of suspense, mystery. It was cool. We were all thinking, where are we going? So we all get on the bus at 7, and Phil took us to a comedy club.
Oh my God, that's hilarious! Really?
Yeah, but it was just fun. And the guy, the comedian up there at the front was making, he incorporated some Laker jokes. He told a joke about Rick Fox. We were all loving it, and it was just a fun thing. And so we try to do that here. One of the first things we did last year was we went on a hike to a waterfall up in Sundance.
Beautiful.
And I think Redford bought the mountain years ago. He just sold it, actually, but there's a great waterfall, and 5 of our guys, again, some from out of state, they said, "Hey, I've never been on a hike before." And here we hiked to this waterfall, and it was a life experience. And I don't know if they've been on a hike since, but we're about to go on another one next week.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I had Steve Kerr as a guest, and Steve, huge believer in work-life balance, of course. And told, many stories about taking the team to places, during the heat of the playoffs or whatever. People don't realize, and you and I know, and you more than me, being a former player, that it's a grind, man. I mean, you are literally on a plane, on a bus,
Mhm.
practice not enough, according to most coaches. At a game back to back, hotel, blah blah blah. It's like this routine that just doesn't stop. And when you can throw in something cultural or different or a comedy club, I remember being on the bus when we went to Indiana. I think you might remember this. Is the finals, and we land in Indiana, and the team, all the guys have the headphones on and they're buried in whatever they're reading or whatever. And Phil asked for their attention, and he gave a whole history lesson on why this state is called Indiana. You remember that? I had no idea. What did I know? I was brought up in Brooklyn. We didn't Indiana to me was like the moon. So, but the fact that during the times of moving west, you know, we kept moving the Indians further and further west and just put them in a one place, basically called it Indiana. I mean, did I know that? But this is important stuff for guys, young guys to know, especially guys who didn't have enough college,
Yeah.
and maybe didn't pay attention enough in college. So it's so interesting. Um, so, Mark, you let's talk about your relationship with Shaq, because that was such a special relationship. I think it's safe to say he took you under his wing, right? There's the famous story about you driving this crappy car or something around, and then he didn't like that. He needed you to have a better looking vehicle, so he took you out and bought you a truck, I think, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Which was such a generous, amazing thing for a teammate to do. Um, what stands out? What, like, one or two things about the big fella that maybe people don't know about, or you just want to share with us?
Well, I think Shaq is one of those really once in a generation human beings. Number one, I mean the generosity, the love of life, the ability to connect with people across all cultural backgrounds, um,
Hmm.
the love of helping others. I mean, Shaq, when I was on the Lakers, yeah, I mean, Shaq saw I was driving a beat up Previa, Toyota Previa, and he said, he knew I was single at the time, and he said, you can't be rolling in the Staples Center in that. I was happy. I was happy with the car. I mean, shoot, that was the first car I had that was really my own.
Right.
So he takes me to the dealership, and what happened from there. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but then Shaq would go to less appreciated communities,
Hmm.
inner cities, different places that don't get the resources, that don't get the respect. And
Hmm.
Shaq would be out there at Thanksgiving giving out turkeys. He'd do things at Christmas.
Yeah, I
Santa
remember you
Claus.
being out there with him, helping him at Shackmas and Shack's Giving and whatever it was called.
You wanted to help,
Yeah.
and so Shaq was always recognizing people that maybe didn't have the opportunities that other people had.
Hmm.
The generosity there. We're on the road at Thanksgiving in Orlando. You might have been there,
Hmm.
Andy. Shaq opens up his whole house, not just to
Yeah.
his teammates, but to every person. Every member of that organization was there,
Hmm.
and just doesn't open up the house for 2 hours, but for basically the whole day on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
he
That's
takes us up
amazing.
to the room. He shows us. He shows us his bedroom with all the TVs and stuff, and he said, back in the day, he had all the TVs. Now he was changing diapers,
Yeah. Right.
and now he's changing diapers, which I can relate to that a little bit now.
Yeah.
Right
Exactly.
now, shoot,
Yep.
I grew up Andy. I was one of 10. I was fifth of 10, so I changed a few of the diapers of my younger siblings growing up.
I'm
I
sure.
went 20 years without changing a diaper, from
Yeah.
15 or 18 to 40. I didn't change a single diaper, and now I change multiple diapers a day.
Yeah. Well, welcome back to that club. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, he was, I mean, he still is an incredibly generous guy. Something just came over, Twitter the other day about he was, I don't know, in some store, Costco or something, and Best Buy, and he saw a mom struggling to buy laptops for her kids, and
Yeah.
ended up buying the laptops for them. This is just the generous guy that he is. And the fact that he and Kobe were two different dudes, different upbringings.
Yeah.
It's kind of two different work ethics. Kobe, we can say, I think fairly, that he was unbelievably obsessed with basketball before he became a father and a husband. Maybe too much, and I think he admitted that. He actually admitted in the book that we did. And Shaq, was a beast when that ball went up, but didn't particularly embrace basketball as much as Kobe did. And we all know that caused some rift between them, but they were brothers, man. They were brothers, and they were warriors on the court. You being on the inside of that, you saw that every single day, right? And like a family, you're going to have issues, right, with different personalities. But what is the lesson that you learned from their relationship, of brotherhood and just being warriors together?
Well, and it's funny, Andy, because as you express some of your observations and some of your inside knowledge of that relationship, you've kind of hit a lot of it on the head.
Mhm.
A high point in the relationship to me was, and you'll remember this, we were playing at the San Antonio Spurs, and I believe it was 01, which was the middle championship of the three-peat. And the Spurs, they were the big bad Spurs. I think they had a higher seed than we had.
Mhm.
And so they had home court advantage. I mean, we went out there and we won 2 games on the road in the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, and people were shocked.
Mhm.
After that series, Kobe went off. Kobe
Mhm.
played great, and
Mhm.
Shaq came out publicly and said, Kobe is the best player in the universe.
Mhm.
And then Kobe turned around and said, Shaq is the most dominant player on the planet.
Mhm.
And this was done over TV, and I'm sitting there in the hotel room watching this unfold, and I was happy because it was just a recognition, a public recognition of each other's talent.
Yeah.
And from that point forward, that relationship, uh, during the time that I was there as a player under contract, that relationship was really moving forward in a good way. Now, different things happen, and different different things transpire, and like you said, in a family scenario, that there's going to be things that come up, and it's water under the bridge, you work through it, all those things. But I think that moment where Shaq just came out and publicly gave great appreciation for Kobe, and Kobe did the same.
Mhm.
Before that,
Mhm.
I can't remember the exact timing, but at one point we were landing in an East Coast city, and
Mhm.
Shaq came to me and he said, hey, tonight Kobe is getting his jersey retired at his high school at Lower Merion. We're going.
Mhm.
And Shaq rounded, as many of us as were available, and there's probably 6 or 7 of us, and
Yeah.
went over to support Kobe. And it was, and so that things get made of the relationship. What was it? But there were so many positives, and so many great things that happened in that relationship as well.
I totally agree with you. And I think, there are journalists out there who need to have a story, and you're in LA, and it might have been different if it was some smaller NBA city, who knows? But I think it's safe to say, Mark, that they were, I mean, at least in my experience, 40 years in this business, the most lethal 1-2 duo. You can point at other ones, Scotty and Michael and Magic and Kareem, and it's unfair to compare. And we don't like to do that here in Legends of Sport. But having been so entrenched with those two guys, and when they were cooking, man, it was
It was
something. I mean, Phil, you would just remember Phil just sitting back, legs crossed, just kind of enjoyed it with everybody else. It's just amazing, man. So, Mark, let's talk about the great Kobe Bryant, our dear friend who we miss. I mean, I know I'm speaking for you because I can imagine how much you miss him, because how much I miss him, and the shock of it. And I wasn't aware of the fact that you were all set and ready to come to the memorial, but your wife went into labor that morning, right?
Yeah.
And I remember not seeing you at the memorial. And then the next day, I actually saw the tweet that she went into labor, and 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 your
Yeah.
and your son was born the day of the memorial on
I
2/24.
know. I know.
Yeah,
It
I
was,
mean,
it's things like that happen, and you just, there's a greater meaning, and
yeah,
look, and I've people have asked me, and Kobe and I, we didn't have a perfect relationship at the start because
Mm-hmm.
he pushed me harder than I've ever been pushed.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know how to respond at times. But guess what? He was harder on himself than anyone else.
Yeah.
And so of course he's going to demand the best out of everyone around him. And yeah, I remember Hannah told me, I said, I really want to go to this memorial, but you are number one, Hannah. And she said, I'm nowhere close to going into labor. Book your ticket. So we booked the ticket on Saturday.
Uh-oh.
And then I'll never forget that night because she woke me up at 2 a.m. I was supposed to fly out at 6 a.m. to LA. She said it's time. And so she was in labor.
Yeah.
We did the pre-labor stuff at the house, then we went to the hospital. Well, we drive out of the house. There was also a huge windstorm that had downed a tree across the road. So we had to go a different way. But I love Kobe. I love Kobe and always love Kobe because he taught me about excellence. He taught me about progression in life. I mean, you alluded to it that Kobe said early in his career he was so focused on basketball. Later in his career, he had that same focus on the court, but his focus was all family. And to kind of see that progression was a beautiful thing to see, because Vanessa is, I mean, does the classier person exist? I don't know. She is beyond classy. And for her and her family to have to endure this pain is hard. It's hard. And the Gigi situation and the others that.
Yeah, it's almost incomprehensible. I mean, I read that you said you still don't believe it, and I wake up every day, I still don't believe it. I actually had to have a mural painted from my last photo of Kobe painted outside my office, right outside that door, so that I could literally see him every day when I come to work. I mean, that it just, I get it. And when you talk about Vanessa, the strength that she's shown publicly, and we all can totally understand how difficult this must be for her behind closed doors, but publicly at the memorial and then at his Hall of Fame enshrinement, man, I mean, it's just so empowering to the rest of us who, sometimes I just fall apart when I think about him, and to see the strength she has and then to carry on for her other three girls. It's pretty amazing.
I don't know how she does it.
Yeah.
She is especially a unique person, and but we knew that just from interacting with her over the years, and it's funny you say that because that book you have in your background, I have that same book up on my wall in my office. Partially to remember him.
Yeah. Well, what would you think is his legacy, his lasting legacy? What goes on and carries on from his life to all of us?
I talk to our players here at Utah Valley all the time, and I say, guys, Kobe was all about excellence. I tell them, I say, guys, there were times when it was so hard because he pushed me so hard. I said, but again, he pushed himself harder than anyone. He was harder on himself than anyone else. And the idea of excellence, he sought excellence in his craft. And when it's all said and done, that's admirable. I admire that. I think about what he did, and I say, okay, as a coach, instead of watching 4 games of game film, I'm going to try to watch 6. Because Kobe, instead of making 500 shots, he's making 2,000. He's doing it at 5 a.m.
Before anyone shows up. He's already done this.
He had already done it, and you saw it at the Staples Center too. Before anyone got to the arena for the game, he got there at 3. He got his work in.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be incredibly inspiring as a coach because you witnessed it, you lived it, you saw it, and now you can kind of impart that. So, more than a lot of people, you can actually take his legacy and his Mamba mentality, and also the balance that you said he learned, that he attained over that period of time that you knew him, and bring that into your coaching life. And I think that's wonderful, Mark. That's wonderful. It's a wonderful legacy that he's left with all of us. I mean, he helped me that way. He and I bonded kind of, it was an unsaid thing from the beginning, but then we got deep into our relationship. And then of course we start doing the book together. And I just said, why did you want to do this book with me? And he goes, because you're as crazy obsessed with what you do as what I do. He goes, we're kindred spirits, man. I knew that from day one.
And he recognized that in you.
In all of us, he did. Yeah.
No, but he saw that in you. And Andy, anyone in the NBA sees that in you because you're there early. You're working on your craft. You do great work. With me, I mean, Kobe and I didn't have too many problems because, I mean, like I said, he pushed me hard, but I think I went as hard as I could. And if I had to guess, in Kobe's mind, he's thinking, okay, look, Mark doesn't have the talent level that some of us other guys have, but he's going to give it everything he has.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. That was your calling card, man. That was it.
But I think even when I went back as a coach, I think, Kobe would share things with me, I think, because we had forged that relationship a decade earlier.
Yeah.
In the heat of the fire.
Exactly. Well, Mark, I'm trying to be super respectful of your time. You've been incredibly generous. Thank you. I want to bring Michael in. Our social media manager, Michael Romanelli, is standing by with 2 quick questions for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's bring Mike in. There he is. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Mark. How you doing?
What's up, Mike? How you doing, man? You good?
On the other side of the office over there.
There we go.
There.
Yep, Andy's right over here.
Yeah.
What you got, Mike?
Away.
So I was doing some research on you, and there's this incredible video on YouTube of you in a play where your shoe comes off, and then you keep playing, but you take your sock off too. Like, can you talk about that? It's incredible.
Mike, I remember the exact play you're talking about. And look, the stakes were high in LA. The minutes for me were scarce. And so the shoe popped off, and I'm just thinking, I'm going to have no traction with this sock. And minutes, I don't know when Phil's going to give me more minutes, and I don't want Shaq and Kobe mad at me. So I ripped that sock off and just tried to play as best I could. Luckily, I was out there on the court and getting minutes, and I didn't want to mess up the minutes because you want more minutes. And so I just thought I'm gonna rip this sock off and try to play some defense still.
I love it. That's peak Mad Dog. So I got one other question for you here. When you were an assistant coach with the Lakers, you coached some really, young guys who at the time had a lot of potential, and now they've grown into stars in this league, like Julius Randle, Jordan Clarkson, and a few other players, D'Angelo Russell, Brandon Ingram, so on. Can you talk about there's like a proud satisfaction that comes with that, like all these years later, even though you're not there anymore, but you get to see guys like that thrive on the highest level?
Yeah, I mean, I feel a lot of gratification for having had the opportunity to work with those players. I stay in touch with almost all of them. When Julius was an all-star, I want to congratulate him. Staying in touch with Alonzo, with Brandon Ingram. I mean, you look at it, Jordan Clarkson here with the Utah Jazz, 6th man of the year. I think Brandon Ingram was most improved player in the NBA. Julius, we talked about him being an all-star. I think D'Angelo was at the all-star level. Ivica Zubac is getting paid, and
Zubac's great.
He's great. And so it was also a testament to Mitch Kupchak and the front office and the scouting department for being able to identify the talents of these players.
Well, Mark, you are such a good friend, a true legend of sport, my friend. I mean, not just as a person, but what you accomplished on the court, what you're doing now with these young men. And I wish you all the best, man. You and Hannah, your growing family. Expect to be a photo soon.
Yeah, exactly.
But I can't thank you enough. And it was such a pleasure to go back in time, and Veronica and I and Michael research and learn things. I mean, one of the things we learned about was this barbecue dinner you guys went to in Memphis with Kobe's former high school teammate. I mean, I didn't know about that. People think Kobe just like hung out in his room all the time, which he did, but when you hear a story like that, it really kind of humanizes him even more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all the times that we spent together on the road, you were always so gracious and just a great guy, and I'm grateful for that, Mark, and for our friendship. So thank you for joining us today, man.
Hey, Andy, I can't thank you enough. Likewise, I really appreciate our friendship as well, and just staying in touch not only with you, but the way you've embraced my own family, my mom, my wife Hannah, and as you meet our kids, as they grow up and develop, we're excited for that as well. So thank you.
Thank you, man. Hey, when you make that trip to Zion, let me know, because
All right,
I've been promising my wife and my kids, my 13-year-old, that we're gonna make a trip out there. We might meet you.
All right, sounds good, man.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much. Good luck with everything going on and with the baby to come.
Okay, take care. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Thanks,
it was
man.
nice to meet you.
You too. Take care.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, it was such a great conversation with the always fun and engaging Mark Madsen. Great person to talk to, great person to know, and I'm so happy we were able to catch up on this episode. All of us at the Legends of Sport podcast send huge congratulations to Mark and his wife, Hannah, on the birth of their new baby girl, Alexandria. Thanks as always to my producer and researcher, Veronica Ahn, and a huge thank you to our social media manager, Michael Romanelli, for making a surprise cameo appearance on this podcast. We got to do that more often, Mike. Thanks, everyone, for continuing to download and subscribe to our podcast. A reminder that you can find us on the LA Times app and online, as well as your favorite podcast platforms, including Apple and Spotify. Please keep following us on Instagram at Legends of Sport, our Twitter at Legends_of_Sport, and our TikTok and YouTube channels, Legends of Sport. You can find my photography, as always, on Instagram at ADB Photo Inc. So thanks again, everyone. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode and another fun guest. Until then, keep checking our social media for the announcement. We also have some other surprise announcements coming up, so stay tuned to our social media. And until then, stay safe and please keep wearing your mask. Okay, folks? See you soon.